Hey everybody, this is Jim Grisanzio from the Oracle Groundbreakers team, back again for another interview tonight, talking to Liron Amitzi from Canada. And Liron is one of the speakers in the Oracle Groundbreakers Yatra that's taking place right now, actually, online. And Liron, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really happy to meet you. We were just having a conversation before I clicked record here, and I was just telling you that I'm reaching out to speakers that I haven't met yet. You know, there's this particular conference has got like I think it's over 100 speakers or some insane number like that because it's running for like 2.5 weeks. You know,
It's huge.
it's just a monster of a conference. Usually, obviously, the Oracle Groundbreakers Yatra is live. It's an actual tour of multiple tech cities in India. I was on it last year. It was really, really great. But now we're virtual, and let's see what we can do with this here. I saw on the schedule actually that you're doing 2 talks. Let's start off with your talks, and then we'll talk about community and some other things as well. So you got this first talk here, better designed than sorry. Let's design our DB schema. So why do I not want to be sorry in the design process?
The process of DB design is very like built into the application. So when you write your application, when you access the data, it depends which table you access and how you access them. So to design the tables, that's something you need to do at the beginning. If something is wrong along the way, it's very difficult to change that. So I picked the title, and I specifically chose intriguing titles. So better design than sorry. So you should design your database or your schema ahead of time to match your requirements, then figure out later then it's not optimal, and then changing that it's a huge mess.
So how common is it that people would just jump right in without thinking beforehand about the overall schema?
Oh, it does happen. It definitely happens. But sometimes you go actually it's funny. It relates to the other session as well, and we'll talk about the other session, I guess, soon. But the thing is that sometimes clients have performance problem, and I'm a consultant, so I'm going to different clients, and then sometimes they have a performance problem, and one of the performance problems is because of the table structure and the relationship between tables and how they designed it. And then when you ask them, it doesn't matter what the answer is, why they did that, if it was after a thought or not, but almost always the answer is, okay, we cannot change that, so this is what you have, and we should do our best in given this design or given these circumstances. So it happens quite often.
So what are some of the thought processes? What are some of the decisions that a DBA would need to go through to make a really, really good design?
Yeah, it's not only DBA. This process involves sometimes product management, sometimes obviously the development as well. So it should be a big process when you design the application. In general, you should design your database schema to match that as well. And some of the things are like performance issues and data integrity issues. I've had quite a few clients or scenarios where data integrity was a problem because they took, for example, they took a few tables with objects and then one table with relationship between everything. Okay, and this is from RDBMS, relational database point of view, you cannot actually enforce too many things in the database itself because it's weird to handle relationship between multiple tables at the same time. So you can do all kinds of triggers and code in the database that handles that. But I've had quite a few cases when this was the design, we had problems, and when you try to figure out what the problem is, we realized that data integrity was we had a problem with the data integrity. So some relationship was there, but another relationship which was required wasn't there. And that was because of, I don't know, all kind of weird bugs in the application. And then you need to figure this out and try to fix it. And it's not always easy. So I had performance issue, I had data integrity issues, sometimes storage issues because some designs require more storage than others, but that's usually, especially these days, it's not a big deal. But yeah, these are mainly topics that you hit if you don't make the right decisions.
Yeah, I think making the right decisions up front, especially before you build something. I used to be in the construction business, which is sort of a developer. In fact, we used all the same terminology back then. It's really interesting. But
and it's the same, right? You can't fix things after. Like if it's something fundamental, that's a huge problem.
Yeah. You need to be able to read the surveys correctly because you want to put the house on the right foundation at the right offsets. You need to read the spec really well before you implement. This is all the same language because it's hard to move a house. It's hard. So presumably, if you build a database and you haven't designed it well and it's scaling up to millions of users and things like this, then it would be hard to fix it after it's done.
If you need, sometimes the requirement, it's all based on the requirements. Sometimes the requirements are, I don't have millions of users. I have just, I don't know, a few, but I have this and this with my data and I want to do, specific queries or specific logic or something like that, or history saving or something like that. And people usually don't think about, for example, history or archiving of all data. And then these tables just grow and grow and grow. And at some point you realize, okay, I can't handle, or this hardware can't handle this much data. And you need to figure out what to do. But if you thought about that at the beginning, you could prepare some archive mechanism, and then you wouldn't have this problem.
Right.
So it's not always scale up, but in some cases, it's even with relatively small amount of data, and it depends on the hardware as well, right? So if you have very weak hardware or low-end hardware, you need to match the design and the data and what you do with it with what you've got.
Yeah. Interesting. You said the second talk is related, and the second talk also has a very interesting title, Real-Life SQL Tuning from 4 minutes to 8 seconds in an hour.
Yeah. So that's going to happen July 15th.
The very end. That's the very end. That's
the
very end. I think it goes to the
16th is the last day, right? Yeah, so the day of the last. And it is a little bit related, but not really, but it has some aspects of design, because what happens with this session, the concept is a real SQL tuning case. Okay, this is something that happened. It's a true story, but it happened, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, maybe a little bit less, but something like that. And this was a client that called me because they had a performance problem with one of the screens in the application, some sort of a dashboard. And the thing is, I called it 4 minutes to 8 seconds because this query started with execution time of 4 minutes. And after the entire process, we got to 8 seconds, which is quite a big improvement.
It's a pretty big delta there.
Yeah, but what I like about this talk is that the scenario is relatively simple to explain, but it involves all kinds of different aspects of tuning, because when we talk about SQL tuning, usually people say, oh, the optimizer or statistics or indexes or stuff like that, which is, pure the Oracle side of executing a query. But it's not always the case. Sometimes it's related to the design. Sometimes it's related to the application logic. So what I do with this session is I go through all the aspects of SQL tuning, including the application design, including the logic, including the SQL themselves, and then, also the Oracle execution part. And I explain the scenario, and and then we go one by one, and we understand what the problem was, and then changing that a little bit and fixing that a little bit, and we got only to 8 seconds because of the application design, because of the not the application, because of the schema design, because they did something weird. But this was basically the only thing that we couldn't change, because what I said before, that's something that it's really hard to change. But if we could change that or design that from the start, I'm sure we would get this query to run in much less than 8 seconds.
So, well, okay, let's just stick for the 4 minutes to 8 seconds. In your consulting work, is that a common story? You go into a client and they're having problems, and you're able to get that amount of improvement? It seems pretty broken. 4 minutes.
Yeah, it depends what you're running. If it's a dashboard, it's broken. If it's a report, maybe it's not that bad. Okay. But yeah, sometimes when you have a performance problem, sometimes it depends what the problem is. Sometimes it's a very easy fix, like indexes, but that's usually on the, let's say, the end customers, the customers that don't really understand the database because they are a startup and they don't have a DBA or something like that. For the bigger, more database aware, let's say, clients, usually it's not that, the improvement is not that big, and usually the challenge is much more difficult. But yeah, sometimes we do manage to fix things like that. Wow. Sometimes we find all kinds of bugs or different Oracle behaviors that we need to fix or work around. And sometimes it's really difficult, or sometimes it takes time to find where the problem is. But if you find the right problem or the exact area that there is a problem, you can improve it by quite a lot.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I would love to go into a client and get that kind of improvement on anything.
Yeah, it takes time though. I present that in an hour, but it took like, I think 2 or 3 days I was there, and it's really easy in retrospect. It's really easy to say, oh, this was the problem and this is how we fixed it. But when you're in it, it's really difficult to figure out all the moving pieces and to understand where the problem really is and connect all the dots in order to solve this puzzle.
Yeah. I'm particularly interested in that process that you just articulated, actually. I'm particularly interested, just at a personal level, with how technical people solve really, really hard problems. And I find, because I've worked in engineering organizations. I used to work in Sun's Solaris engineering organization on the Open Solaris project. This is obviously before Oracle. And I've worked in marketing as well. So both at Sun and at Oracle. And then the thinking process about how those two groups of people actually go about attacking problems is very, very different. And so whenever I get around technical people or even scientists and PhDs and things like that, they go through a different thinking process, and I'm especially interested in that. So as you struggle through hard problems like that, that's just a kind of a hobby of mine to listen to those stories.
Yeah, it's very interesting, all the troubleshooting,
right.
Mechanism or process, let's say. My wife is actually a PhD student in biology, and I remember in the past, at least when she did her undergrad or her master's, we talked about all kinds of different things, and biology is completely different than computers, right? Computers is very deterministic. Biology is very not deterministic. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about all kinds of different in biology, and I was implementing my computer science troubleshooting process, and she said, no, it doesn't work that way. But once in a while I did give her an idea or something that she said, oh, you know what, that's an interesting approach. because yeah, troubleshooting is troubleshooting.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. But
The
different
world is
fields
different.
approach it differently, different fields.
Yeah.
But I'm just interested in the thinking process of how you get from a surface level problem, you observe a problem, and how you're able to get from here all the way to here, all the different steps you have to take, because you're solving problems at a much, much lower level thinking than you are up on here, up on your
Yeah.
top. You just don't walk up to a problem and say, oh, yeah, it's that. You got to think about it. You got to transcend a little bit,
Right.
And I don't know, that's just an aside.
No,
You're,
it is interesting. Yeah. I ask a
so
lot of questions, by the way.
what's that?
I ask
Oh,
a lot of questions.
yeah.
Yeah, people, when I interview people, I usually ask these kind of very open questions, and I see how the person reacts. And sometimes it's like, okay, you have a performance problem, like, the client says, this is the interview question. The client says that, the system is slow. What do you do? And some people dive right in and say, oh, we need to check, these processes and what happened and, this report and stuff. And at the beginning, I help them and I say, okay, but, you first need to understand what they mean by, the system is slow. And then, they take a step backwards and say, oh, okay, so is it happening now? Is it usually in the certain days and times of the day? And, when you ask question, you actually build a puzzle
Right.
in my head. You build a puzzle, and then there are some missing pieces, and these missing pieces is more questions that you need to ask and things that you need to start checking, and then
Right.
you start drill down into the specific issue.
Yeah, there's a lot of neuroscience here. I'm really interested in it. And then when you go to sleep, your mind still works on it all night long, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, you're also an Oracle ACE director.
Right.
And I'm just looking at my notes here. You're an instructor, you do teaching, and you are involved in the British Columbia user group.
Yeah.
So it seems like, you're obviously involved with clients and you're doing that work, that technical work, but you're also out in the community. And, I know obviously for being an Oracle ACE director, you're traveling and you're giving presentations and things like that. So the community seems to be, a part of your interests, at least, right?
Yeah, definitely. I love that, and it sucks that we can't have these conferences now.
Yeah.
Yeah, even more for me because I'm working from home. I'm originally from Israel, and we moved to Canada 5 years ago. So in Israel, I worked in an office with people, but since I moved to Canada, I've been working from home. So basically, I don't have much socialization with other people during the normal working days. And these conferences, they really give me these social interactions that I need. And it really sucks that we can't have that now. But I love these conferences. I was involved with the Oracle user group community in Israel, and once I knew I'm moving to Canada, I looked for the local Oracle user group, and I became part of them. And after a couple of years, or maybe 3, the president decided to move on, and I took the president role of the group. So now we're not very active because of this pandemic, but we are trying to be quite active and have conferences here as well. And I invite people, and I go to conferences, and I love this part. It's part of who I am, I guess.
So do you have any advice for, say, younger developers or DBAs or really anybody in the field? I mean, how would they sort of, if they go to a conference that, you're speaking at, let's say, and they're asking you questions after you come off the stage and they say, this Oracle ACE director, Groundbreaker ambassador, Java champion, you're contributing to Opens, you're doing all these different things, how do I do that? That would be a question. What would you, how would you guide them?
First of all, I would say that it needs to be something that you love doing. Okay, if you don't like writing blogs and speaking and, you know, socialize or something like that, that's not for you. Now you can be very, very technical and you can write your own blog and that's fine, or do other stuff and you can be an expert. But the thing about the Oracle user group and the Oracle ACE program and the Java champions and all of these, or the Groundbreaker basically, which is the general name for everything, is all about the community. So if you love being part of the community and you love to contribute, that's the way to go. And then I would say start speaking at conferences, or first of all, go to conferences and socialize with people. And many people have stage fright. So I know that many people, speakers and Oracle Aces and everyone in the community will be happy, thrilled to help young people or beginners, let's say, in the speaking world. They would love helping them. So just approach people that you respect and talk to them about that. And then, you know, start this process of speaking conferences. And if you're into writing a blog, write a blog. Don't force yourself to do that, because, you know, if you force yourself and you don't enjoy that, you'll drop the ball after a while.
Yeah.
So find the things that you love, and Oracle, being an Oracle Ace or Oracle Ace director, I don't think it's a goal, it's a recognition of what you did. So if you become involved with the community, if you speak at conferences, if you write a blog, if you contribute to the community, user groups and so on, you will see that eventually people know you, and then the recognition will come.
Cool. It's interesting. I asked this question to a lot of people because you know, selfishly looking for the feedback for myself as well, because I've done a lot of community development work, and I'm going to be doing a talk at this conference tomorrow on community development. So just a general talk on some principles that I've picked up over the years, and everything that you say is consistent. So that's good. I know I'm fairly on track. So that's good. So all right. Well, Liron, it was great talking to you. I learned a lot as usual with these things, and hopefully next year or the year after, we'll be able to meet in India or in California or Israel or wherever. The India community, you're obviously presenting at OGYatra here. The India community is really dynamic. They're very smart, but they're also very, very engaging as well. So maybe next year we'll get you out on the tour to 10 cities for the real OGYatra. Yatra means journey, by the way, for you guys listening. It's just journey. So it's a tour. Anyway, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye now.